Alright, so this week we're going to talk about custom brushes, and we're going to do a technique it's a variation of a technique that Burt Monroy did some time ago where he created some stitching as a custom brush. Well, I'm going to take it a bit further and show you how you can kind of stylize it and make it look like kind of like sloppy stylized stitching. It'll make sense in a moment, but that's where we're going to start with. So here I have an image of a denim texture, and this is in fact the denim texture I created as a down and dirty trick in Photoshop User Magazine some time ago. So what we're going to do is actually just put a tear line in here and then add the stylized stitching to it, like it was a really sloppy repair on this this denim fabric or something like that. So let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer on this, and I'm going to go in here and choose the brush tool, my toolbar, and we're going to get a relatively good sized brush, about a 19 on this particular image. Looks pretty good. And we're going to open up the brush panel, click on its icon here, and all I want to make sure is that the shape dynamics is activated and that my size jitter is set to 0, but the control is set to pen pressure because I am in fact using a pressure sensitive tablet. Now if you weren't using a pressure sensitive tablet, you could probably just maneuver this size jitter slider anywhere just to give some variation to the line, or you don't have to do it at all. You can just simply draw the line. The point is that it's a freehand line. So I'm going to start over here on the right side and just draw across the document just like that. So it's kind of uneven, it's a little bit wavy like a tear would be. Most tears are not perfectly straight, so that's what we want. So now that is on its own layer, so because I want to apply a layer style to it. So I'm going to double click on the icon and we'll bring up the layer style dialog. I'm just going to activate a bevel and emboss. And what I want to do is actually set the style to outer bevel. And we're going to set this direction to down. I'm going to go and click off the Use Global Light, and you can see what happens. It kind of gives it a little bit of dimension, like it's an actual, got depth in it, a little bit of a cut there. So, all that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now, what we want to do is go ahead and create the stitching itself. So what I'm going to do is actually create that in a new document. So I'm going to go under File, New, and let's go ahead and create about a 600 by 600 at 100 DPI. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. So now, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer in this file. And I'm going to grab the pen tool. And I'm just going to come up here. I'm just going to click once up here. And I'm going to click down here. And I'm just going to give this a slight bend by dragging out the curve here. As when I click and drag, I can bend the path out here. I'm just going to give it a slight bend to about right there. So that is my path using the same brush we used a while ago. But I'm going to turn off that pressure sensitivity. So now when I draw the line, it's straight and flat. I'm actually going to make it a little bit smaller. Let's go with about a 15. I think it looks good. So in my paths panel, if I go over here and highlight that particular path, I can go into the pull-out menu and go to Stroke Path using the brush tool, click OK, and there it is, applied it to there. Well, now on that same layer, what I'm going to do is actually make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to use the right bracket key and just make that brush just a little bit bigger, and just drop one piece here and one piece there. So now it looks like, almost looks like a shoelace or something like that. But now what we want to do is define this particular graphic as a brush. So I'm going to load it as a selection. I'm just going to Command or Control click directly on the layer. We'll load it as a selection. We'll go into the Edit menu and go to Define Brush Preset. And we'll just call it Stitch. Looks good. Minimize that. And you can see it's already taken on the appearance of our stitching brush. Let's go ahead and make the size, bring the size down considerably to kind of go along with the size of our image here. Right about like that size, I think looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer here. And now let's adjust something where I'm going to first change the color. And I'm going to go ahead and use a yellow stitching. So let's go inside the color picker and choose a relatively deep yellow color. We'll click OK. So if I start to paint, you can see what's going on here. It's painting it, but now we've got to change the behavior of the brush as we paint. So let's bring up the brush panel. So first thing I'm going to do is activate Shape Dynamics. And I'm going to bring the size jitter to about 15%. And then I'm going to go down here where the angle is, and let's going to change this to about 5. Actually, no, let's go with about 3 on that one. And I'm going to take the size jitter up considerably more. Now, here's where you can get a little creative with it. All the way to 0 has it completely even. Almost looks like it's like machine stitched or something like that. We want this to be kind of sloppy, like it was hand stitched poorly. So we're going to increase that size jitter quite a bit. And then we're going to go up here in the brush tip shape and increase the spacing. Just to the point where they're perhaps touching a little bit. I'm going to space it out to about there. It looks like we're going to have to go back into the shape dynamics and just modify that angle a little bit, just so they're touching. So we're getting that kind of really interesting static look. So let's just do a test and see what we got here. I think that size is jittering a little too much. There, I think that looks pretty good. So actually bring in that spacing just a little bit more. So that looks good, I think. So let's go up in here, make that brush a tad smaller, and all I'm going to do is just trace over this line with that brush all freehand. This gives it that much more loose, kind of sloppy feel to it. So let's just drag our mouse over. And there we've gone ahead and stitched up that area of our image. But it might look like stitching, but it doesn't actually look like, because it's not realistic yet, not like the background is. So let's go ahead and apply some layer styles to give it a much more realistic look to it. Well, the first thing is, let's apply a bevel and emboss. And let's modify the direction of the light. Maybe increase that depth a little bit. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply a texture to this. If I highlight that, I can go up here in the texture window. What I'm going to use is this one right here. Second row, fifth one over. Just select that and see what happens to the text. It kind of takes on that twine kind of look to it. But I'm going to bring the scaling down just a little bit. Let's go with about 50% on that. And that tends to give it a little bit more realistic to it. I'm going to take this depth down probably to about 60. It's a little less harsh. I think that looks pretty good. Now let's activate an outer glow. And I'm going to go over here into the color picker and choose just a black color. And we're going to set the blend mode to multiply. So let's increase the size slightly and the spread just to give it kind of some shadow and a little bit of, you know, impression into the denim around the stitching area here. Let's bring that opacity back up. So now I think that looks pretty good. So it looks like we're getting some really convincing stitching there. So you can modify these layer styles a little bit depending on your liking and everything like that. But let's go ahead. Actually, I'm going to change this to precise. The technique, you can change to precise and it gets it much more tighter in there. Yeah, I think I like that better. That looks a lot better. So now we'll click OK. So there we've got what looks like some pretty convincing stitching going on. If I wanted to take this a little bit further, could go in here and modify this by darkening. Let's get the burn tool and perhaps darken this areas around where the threads are going into the denim, just to give some color variation. And I think that looks pretty good. Now let's just add some text. We have a stitch in time right there. Pretty cool stuff. So, gives you a really good idea of all kinds of really cool effects you can apply or achieve with just using custom brushes and layer styles all inside Photoshop. So, have fun with it, and we'll see you next time.